I've learned personally is that agents work better when they have strong feedback loops. I think about tasks that I have a very strong feedback loop I could give to the genie so it can go and solve it.
What would you say are the three best practices of how to use AI internally?
Be mindful about the size of the problem that you're providing to the agent. The longer the task you give to a LLM or an agent is, the less deterministic would be its outcome.
I would be very interested in knowing more about the technological stack that you use at Ara.
Welcome back one more time to the Agentic Project. Today, we have Jordi, CTO at Ara, the company trying to disrupt the way meetings work, competing against Google Meets and Zoom Info. Jordi, how are you? Thank you so much for being here.
It's such a pleasure to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Awesome. So I wanted to start with, to put a little bit into context to our audience and also to jump right into the discussion. Jordi, you have worked for almost 10 years in Silicon Valley in companies such as Instagram, Facebook, and Snapchat, and on another well-known Spanish company called 20. And now you're building your own. You've been working for them as a technical lead and even CTO for other companies, and now you're building your own company. I wanted to ask you, how has the way you are working with your team and with the tools that you work with today changed in the past 10 years with the disruption of AI?
Wow. Yeah, it's a great question. So it has changed a lot. And I mean, there's parts that has changed a lot, there's parts that not. But like when I started working here in Barcelona, the first job I got was in a video game company. And I've been thinking a lot of a conversation I got with one of all these person, like guys that used to work in assembler, and he always was playing stories about working in assembler, how he did the aesthetics in a Pellat game, and like the difference with then we're working with C++, and that it was 100x more productive, blah blah blah. And lately, I've been thinking a lot about this conversation because I feel a little bit the same, no? Like we came from working where we needed to be very specific on everything that we needed to do on the company, and then very repetitive in a lot of things, on entering this AI world where with the helps of agents, autocompletes, like our way to code has been completely different. And in the other hand, like when it comes to build products, like things hasn't changed that much, at least yet. Like when you're looking for product market fit, when you're trying to understand how you can provide value to your users, all this is still a very, like would say, almost manual task that AI doesn't assist us that much. So I think we are living into both worlds, but as someone that started like 10 years ago, it's so exciting to like have to rediscover how we build products. It's awesome. It's a great time to live here.
Quick break. I wanted to thank you for showing up to the Agentic Project, the podcast where Danny, my co-host, and I interview founders building the latest AI tools in the space. This podcast wouldn't be possible without flowhawk.com, the AI agency that Danny and I run in order to help teams optimize their operations. If you think that your team could have more efficient operations, go to flowhawk.com. Okay, let's keep going with the podcast. In terms of internally, like time deploying or finishing sprints or deploying new features from in the past 10 years, and aligned to the question before, I want to know for those technical teams that aren't yet implementing AI or they are doubtful on how to use it and which tools, tell them what has been your experience, the before and after, which tools have you been using that work the best for you and so on.
Sure. Like, wow, there's a lot to speak around here. Like we were speaking about this and I was just remembering when I entered Facebook, we would deploy it every 2 weeks. So imagine we would put some code, we would have some idea, we would have to like start building this feature. At Facebook, it was a place where it was known for their agility and how fast we would build. So from an idea to code to deploying was something like 3 weeks. And then it was thought as, wow, it's crazy. now, like fast forward to nowadays at Ara, for example, at a startup like ours, we deploy our backend like, I don't know, 10 times a day. And a lot of what we will, so when we come to the tools that we're building, for example, us, we are using a lot like the agentic tool like Cursor. I guess that you guys have not, I mean, a lot of developers are using this. Like it has changed a lot our way to approach code. Where like I think we have two modes of working. One is the autocomplete mode, which will make us 2x faster on building anything. But now, like as we get to learn how to use these agents, like there's a lot of the tasks that we can automatically build with these agents. So like in the last year, it's been a progress of learning how to use these agents. I like a lot how like Ken Beck is one of the developers like that has been experimenting with this, call them genies. And she calls them genies because she says that it brings wishes, but it does not always brings them as you want them. You know, like there's this story that you would get a genie and you would ask them for a lot of money, but all of a sudden you got the money, but you didn't get it as you wanted. Like I see these cursor AI agents as something like this. Sometimes I will ask something and they will build it in a way that I was not expecting them to build it. And it could be that it's not completely useful to us. So I would say that in the last year, we've been learning how to use them. But like as of today, there's a 20% of the tasks that we do that we can do through one of these genies that take us to 15x faster. So basically, these 3 weeks that we used to have before with Facebook, like from like having the idea to deploying, nowadays it can take like 3 days, you know, which is a great change. And when it comes to bugs and little features, it can even be 1 day. So yeah, but I think that what like when these people, I mean, I'm like people in bigger companies that are still not using the genies or all the potential of AI and they are still doubtful around like how it can be useful. What I tell them is there's this false expectation about you're going to install the AI, you're going to install the genie, and all of a sudden you'll be 10x more productive. No, there's a learning curve to have, and this is super important. And there's a lot of literature to be written about how to use that.
Actually, you were mentioning like you are using these genes in very specific tasks. Could you provide some examples to be more concrete about how these?
Totally. So I think like what I've learned personally is that genies or the agents work better when they have strong feedback loops. So let me put an example. For example, I have a bug in the backend. I can go and say to the agent, hey, I have a bug in the backend that reproduces when A, B, and C. And like for the agent, like there will be a percentage, like it be a 40, 60% of the cases, they will find the bug and they will solve it. But if I want to have a 100% on this, like if I write the test that I can write with the autocomplete, showing up, this test is failing, like a user comes and say, look, I log in and after login, I send the recording and I make it 3 seconds short and it breaks. So if I can make a test, an automated test that do that, and I say to the agent, here's a test that is failing, solve this, don't touch the test. It's important to tell it. Then it's super effective. And like that's basically a feedback loop. If I can say, look, there's this element that disappears in the UI and I can tell it's this div, for example, then the genie will be very good at coming and saying it's for this, and this. So these tasks that we completely use genies, I try to think about tasks that I have a very strong feedback loop I could give to the genie so it can go and solve it.
So when you say genie, it's like you have like, so in the end, like the way I've worked with AI for coding is just basically I use a lot of Cloud Code inside Cursor. And
yes,
I've used this before, like providing unit tests and asking the LLM to solve the problem without, as you're saying, without tweaking the tests. So, but from what I understanding,
that's exactly what I call a genie is the agent. Yeah.
Okay.
Like these agents that you use in Cursor when you put them on the right side of your UI and you ask it things and you have this conversational thing. That's what I call genies.
Okay. And actually, because what I've seen is that there's some people that use sub agents. This is more in Cloud Code. To be honest, I still haven't seen the value of this. I don't know if you have managed to work with this and if you have found it useful, or still if you prefer like for every new action that you have to do, you just use the general LLM without having these predefined prompts behind this agent, right? Because in the end, what I understand by agent, it's like these LLMs that have some predefined context behind the scenes, and that you can actually use them over and over again for a specific task. So I'm not sure if this is something that you have used or.
So I haven't, I have experimented a little bit, but I haven't seen, I mean, in your side. So for example, I think that there's context that I want to give to my agent that is always constant. For example, I'm working on the backend. I want to say that I'm using PyTest and that if they want to test, they used to use this environment. And that's a copy paste thing I have that every time I, at the top of the test, at top of the agent, I have to say this, or you can then, like put these files that the agent can read as context. So like by providing context, but I haven't seen, enough. Could be that I'm not the kind of users that want to use it, but I haven't seen the value of something that is as easy as for me to have a copy paste, like a shortcut paste that I put on top of the agent. No, I haven't used them yet. I also think that there's these agents that work on background, that these agents that work on background, like for example, in our team, there's one developer that use them for really little tasks, no? And then it does a pull request and we verify the pull request. I think that the user person that will have more value with these agents that work in background could be people that are not as interested in the concretes of the code and that, will work on like something more vibe coding, like in the pure sense of I just want you to do that. I don't care how.
Nice.
So that's where I've seen more value in these like background agents that are super interesting too. Yeah.
So now that you were going a little bit over how you're using agents internally and so on, what would you say are the 3 best practices of how to use AI internally for your teams?
Good question. Okay. Like to use AI when it comes to coding, for example, my advices would be, first of all, what I was saying about the feedback loops. There's nothing better than to be clear with your agent. This is your feedback loop. Follow this feedback loop. The second thing I would say is like, be mindful about the size of the problem that you're providing to the agent. And like when I explain this, I say, look, for agents or generative AI in general, what it does is to like think about what will be the next element after a list of elements. For example, like to simplify it a lot, when I explain it to someone that doesn't know about AI, is like if I told you fork, knife, what's the next element? Most people will say spoon. And that's basically what generative AI is, like 10 billion times more complicated. The problem of this is that as the list is longer and you have more elements in it, the possible solutions of what's the next element grows a lot. So what I mean by this is that the longer the task you give to a LLM or an agent is, the less deterministic would be its outcome. And that's a way for me to think about both when I code or I build tools using agents and AI, or both when I use it, is I need to be very mindful of what's all these list of elements that I'm giving and how I can make it as pure as possible. So like simplifying this for the agent, like is super important. So when I'm doing a task, I could tell my agent, hey, I want to build this new screen that has a header, and that's blah, the header is like this, and then has this, and like has a body, and it will be a list of contributions, and on the bottom I'll put in a button so you can log out. I'll try to separate these tasks one after the other and make it in small bites. And the last one is, there's a video, I think a lot about this video, that is a father in YouTube that says to the kids, tell me how to do a peanut butter sandwich. Have you seen it? And then the father, his game is about the kids are telling, take the peanut butter. He always does it the wrong
I've
way,
seen it. I've seen it.
And
Yeah,
then-
I've seen it. I've actually seen it. Yeah.
So these agents, like you're basically the kid and the parent is, so when you're speaking to an agent, like try to be this kid that is being very careful about what it says to the parent, like take the knife, now with the knife, put it inside and come from here and then learn, like depending on the agent you are using and like how you can be less specific about some things or the other. But like if you really like a good way to learn for me to use an agent has been thinking about these kids and being the kid and trying to say, now take a piece of bread, but no, don't take it in your hand, put it in the plate, So that's my 3 advices.
Super solid. Super solid. Daddy, go for it. I think you have
actually, I
one.
wanted to, because we have now discussed about how to use AI to increase productivity. Let's talk about and how you have integrated AI inside the product. Like, first of all, how can a user use AI?
So we're using AI in a lot of little bigger things and little things inside Ara. So Ara is this tool where, like, to just give a little bit of context, like it's like a video chat if you want a synchronous video chat. And basically it's a new way to communicate inside Teams where like the cost of having a meeting that is synchronous is not always worth it. But like having a chat on a Slack is actually too complete. Like the subject is too complicated to speak, and we've been seeing a lot of value on using Ara in a lot of use cases. And basically, so people understand is when you want to start an Ara, you create a video and you explain what you want to speak about, and then people can add videos to this. So if you want it, like thinking about the room, but multi-directional. So like around this, like we started using AI on Ara first for transcriptions. So like that has been one. So one of the problems you have in meetings is sometimes you have this big meeting with 10 people. And if these 10 people, there will be 2 that are super interested in the subject that are speaking. There will be people that are 20% interested and 60%, but everyone is spending the same time there because they are all there. So one thing that like Ara has been very successful at is saying, hey, if you want to consume the video at 1x and being focused in this, that's great. If you want to consume it at 2x because you are 70% interested, that's cool. If what you want is a summary of this, and then you deciding if actually that's a contribution you want to zoom in and watch the video, that is cool too. Or what you want is a summary of all the contributions, you can do it too. And where AI plays the role here is that it allows us to have transcriptions, complete transcriptions, but then summarize these transcriptions, summarize the meeting, all this, like that's where we started to get into AI. And then we started building around agents. So there's a thing like that I think AI is solving now that is great, is that, you guys have worked in a company and someone does a Google Doc and does a very big Google Doc about a feature that you want to build. So the engineer is interested in one perspective of this Google Doc, the PM in another perspective, the person that from marketing will have another perspective, but there's only one Google Doc. So what AI can do is that say, I'm the engineer and that's the source of information. Write the Google Doc for me about what's interesting from the engineering standpoint of this feature. And I think this will be revolutionizing in AI because basically until now, when we were passing information around, we were passing under one perspective. But AI is capable of adapting information and give you the perspective that you actually need. That's one thing we've been working on Ara, where you have an agent and you can say, hey, take the standards from last week And as an engineering manager of these people, tell me what has been the progress, which is a different question to say, I'm the tech lead and I want to know if someone is blocked. I could be, I don't want to watch the standards from 3 teams that I'm tech leading. I just want you to come and give me the perspective I need to do my work more in like be more productive, in a productive way. And that's something that I think AI will help a lot of people. And at Ara, we are using this opportunity.
So as
And then we use AI.
Go for it.
No, and the last one thing I was saying is that we use AI a lot for classifiers. So I don't know, like when I was at Instagram, we had data scientists, okay? And we had classifiers. For example, I was working on this business. We built it all at Instagram. I was the first engineer in a team that would build all the business. When you can convert to business now to Instagram? That's what I built. It's still there. And one of the things that we had a problem with is, okay, now we build all these great things, but we don't want everyone to convert to business. We want the businesses to convert to business. So a data scientist came and said, don't worry, guys, I'm going to do a classifier that it was the AI from before. So the classifiers, basically, you give them an input and they give you, they classify this input in groups. For example, business, non-business, influencers, for example. So we would take the description, we would decide if this is a business. And how the data scientist did that is that he took 10,000 accounts. We had a service of people that at the time I think were in India that basically we explained them to these people. That's how a business account is. So they would take the 10,000 account and start classifying them manually. And then with a linear regression, you would rate the features, blah, blah, blah. That's super expensive. And now with AI, with deterministic AI, what you can do is use the LLMs to do this kind of classification. For example, we do it for emails. Like we detect if an email is a group email or person email. We had a problem in the feature for this. So before it would have take a classifier, a bunch of, dictionaries, blah, blah, blah. Now we can use LLM for this way cheaper. And then when we have a lot of results, then you can build with this stillbird of one of these models, you can build a classifier.
That's nice. Actually, because now you are mentioning a lot of technologies here. So I would be very interested in knowing more about the technological stack that you use at Ara. So can you explain us a bit how the stack has evolved from the moment you started the company till now in terms of infrastructure? I don't know, you mentioned you have a backend. Like what technologies are you using, what programming languages, and how have this changed as you have been growing?
So we have 2 frontends right now to be fast. Like one is in React and the other one is in Flutter. Flutter is a framework that allows you to do iOS and Android with a single code base. Super cool. And here's an example of productivity in AI. I've never used Flutter. I've never learned, and it's a language that is called Dart, whatever. I've never been as fast as learning a new framework that I've been with AI. Just because the perspective we were speaking, sometimes I didn't understand something, I could go to ChatGPT and say, I don't understand this example. Explain me for someone that knows iOS, that knows this language, explain me why this is working this way. And it's a super cool way to learn because it builds on what you know already. And that's super cool. So we use Flutter, we use React, and then we have a backend that is Python. We have it on top of Django. We deploy that through Fargate. That is like we have all our infrastructure in AWS. And then we deploy through Fargate because it's a super easy way to deploy. And basically our Ara has a lot of peaks. For example, people do stand-ups in the morning and all of a sudden we have a bunch of teams doing stand-ups, for example. But in the weekend, Ara is almost a desert, because everyone, no one works, which is great. It shows good balance. So there's a little bit of activity, but it's I don't know, a 5% of the activity that there is during a normal day. So ACS helps a lot to be able to scale and unscale our instances. And then that's where we have one of the biggest backend that we call the social graph. And that's the backend that basically manages the meeting and the contributions and what would be the product itself. And we have a bunch of lambdas to do AI stuff, like a bunch of lambdas that are actually the ones that will put jobs, and that these lambdas will either them or either like with a service like OpenAI, like do like the slower AI stuff. The problem of AI is that a lot of these things are slow.
You mean, for example, the summaries and all this stuff?
For example, one of the things that we do that is super interesting is segmentation. Like when you're having a conversation, how do you segment the phrases? Because people can react to the phrases. So the phrases have to be semantically correct. You cannot divide them like in the middle of an argument and stuff like this. So we first transcribe, that takes a while. Then we take the transcription and we segment this transcription. And then we summarize based on this segmentation and this transcription. And all this is like little lambdas that can do that. And then report back to the main backend to say, hey, here are the results. So you can save it in your Postgres. We have a Postgres database, and it can be served very quickly when the user asks for it.
Cool.
Yeah. And then we have, S3 for storage. And, we serve, of course, we serve the React app through a CloudFront, and we have a bunch of little infrastructure, but like we use AWS basically.
All right, that's an insightful explanation, actually. Thank you so much for all these details.
And now that we're talking and putting a bit into perspective how it works, so Ara, you record like probably most of the meetings or the videos are going to be about internal/confidential information about the company and about what you're building and product and sometimes even clients. And you're using AI to do summaries and that stuff. And as far as we are aware, you're established here in Europe. So how are you dealing with the European standards, with GDPR compliance and so on? Have you built like an infrastructure according that way? And if so, how is that working?
So for us, privacy is like one of our pillars when it comes to the culture of the engineering team. Because for example, one of our lines of work is leadership, like what we call extended leadership, where they take decisions around the company, strategize. So it's super important for us to keep everything separated. And for example, not even me can access one of the videos. The videos are in a stream, but they're encrypted. And there's only one only our Fargate instance that we do everything in infrastructure as code. Okay. And what this allows us is to be very clear on what are the permissions, who has the permissions to access the S3. And the only one that has the permissions to access the S3 is actually our backend that is able to sign a petition to the S3 and then provide to the client a temporary link with the key that will allow it to read it for 1 minute, and so we are very we're very conscientious about this. So actually none of us have access to the database and all this. And by infrastructure as code, we allow that if one of our engineers would be malevolent or whatever, or would like to do a change, it would be registered, because the only way to deploy for us is through our complete continuous deployment system. So we would see who has done the change, and then we could take action. And also we are notified, all of us, every time a change is done in this infrastructure as code. So when it comes to security, this is the approach that we follow. And when it comes to GDPR, so of course all our infrastructure is in Europe, and that's one important thing of GDPR. And the other important thing of GDPR is, and here is where it gets super interesting with AI, is you cannot identify user. What means that, imagine, there's our user spends hours, we have users that spend hours speaking on. So if you would take all this text and give it to an AI could probably start thinking around if this person has a political tendency through, progressist or liberal or whatever. But the important thing is that we don't process this information and we don't save it. And here is the, like, I think, like, the super interesting conversation that we have around this is, what do we get to process? Because until the data is raw, like, we don't know, we don't know, like, we have videos of a lot of people. We don't know if they are male or female, or, because we haven't actually passed an AI that take a decision on this. And there's this line for me, there's this clear line between what we could do with AI and what we actually do. And on this line is what I think a lot of companies like us right now are trying to navigate, while it's still not completely clear. Like, because you could say that you have deterministic information toward if they are liberal or not, but while you haven't asked the question, you still don't know, and you are compliant. So here we are. I think it's a super interesting subject.
So actually, I think, well, I guess you're using, like, for example, OpenAI in Azure, like, so it's in Europe, or how does it work? Is like that?
So, like, we are using a lot of models through AWS now that allows us to deploy. We build some of our prototypes on top of OpenAI because it's easier for us. But, like, a lot of, like, the companies are working either through Azure, either through, like, Bedrock on AWS.
Okay. So in the end, I think, like, these providers allow you to have, like, a way to ensure that the model is closed, no, and that the data doesn't leave the infrastructure, so that it cannot be used to train. So
it's not stored. So basically, while the data, like, the data has to pass through Europe. So the data has to always stay in Europe in the pass through, and also, like, there's two parts, and it should not be stored by our providers, either by, and in our case, it has to be stored in a secure environment. It should not be accessible. So if one of our providers would store, like, the conversations of our companies, then we would not have control over who can access it. While we have it internally, we have control over who accesses it, and we can say, hey, no one accesses it, and these are the protocols we follow, so no one can access it.
So in the end, I guess that you are taking these transcripts that are encrypted in your backend, but somehow you are also, well, the conversations, right? You are passing them through these models that you have deployed using AWS. In the end, how do you prevent that not personally identifiable information is sent to these models?
So personal identifiable, like, and that's our approach right now. I think that we have a lot to learn still, but personal identifiable information is, imagine, like, is this video that I'm having personal identifiable information? Like, probably not. No, if I have a screenshot, if I save a screenshot of this, imagine that behind this, that I have here behind a poster that puts Jordi. This is still not considered personal identifiable information because it's still an image, hasn't been processed. And there's nothing that says this is Jordi. And we approach conversations exactly the same way. Like, one thing is that if we would send the AI, tell me on this conversation who's participating and what are their opinions on politics, and we store that, then this is, like, not GDPR compliant. While it's a raw text that interpret could end up, it's still not, it's GDPR compliant. And that's how we are approaching it right now. We're a little startup. I'm sure we have a lot to learn here, but that's how we are approaching it right now.
Nice. And this leads me to the dilemma that we haven't actually discussed this in the podcast so far, Danny, but you've been in Silicon Valley for almost 10 years, Jordi, and now you're building, like, you started your entrepreneurial career here in Barcelona. We have seen the US and China fight their own war when it comes to AI. As always, US takes the lead in quality, and then China takes the lead in affordability. And Europe is sitting, like, farther down in the middle of nowhere doing nothing because we're still fighting with compliance and regulation and so on. And even though we're seeing a lot of startups, especially related with AI, actually thrive, such as Lovable or Mistral and a bunch more, what is your take on the philosophical implications of like, yes, okay, we're very secure. Our data is very secure because it's super protected. But on the other end, like in terms of growth, when I see the entire world, like, well, the entire other like main forces of the world overtaking us, like by far. What's the
Yeah, I
deal
mean,
here?
I think it's a great debate, no? And all comes to loss of opportunities versus like security for our society. And I would say that like definitely when you go into the vibe of the US, it comes to don't ask permission, say sorry. No, like this thing that says better sorry than than how
Yeah.
they say it. See. So like there's definitely this vibe there, and it has like I want to, for example, I was in a moment of Facebook like around 2016 that there was a big lesson around this, no? When when in 2016 there was the US election and there was Hillary versus Trump, no? After the fact, like Facebook started looking into their data and find out a bunch of stuff like what has come to be Cambridge Analytica, or stuff also around like how kids have been influenced by social networks. So like there's definitely consequences in what we built. And this is great in the sense of wow, we build things that change society, but it's sometimes we have to think that it's for good and for bad. And I think there's a healthy balance between these two things. When I look right now, like at all the startups that are being built here in Barcelona, for example, but in the south of Europe, like I'm impressed on how many people are building things that are great. Look, for example, when it comes to models and all, sometimes we don't see Mistral, that is a company in Paris that are building models and are doing great. Like they are building models for concrete stuff that are working very well. Of course, it's not as big as I don't know Anthropic or like OpenAI, but I think that Europe is opening themselves to let invest in startups, or I don't know, like for example, startups here in Spain have all these credits that are called Sedeti, and the Sedeti that it's like are putting a bunch of money in startups. So I think there's great opportunities. Like there's as a company for us that are trying to disrupt in a world of Google Meets and are going to go with Google Meets, Slack, and these big players. Like there's like we are way more risk averse and we are an exception. But when you look at like Europe is very good at startups that like B2B startups that are actually be like solve a very concrete problem. And I think that there's a lot of room in our legality to build any of this. And I will add that we have great talent. Something that I've learned, like being in the US, is that I was, like when I went to the US, I thought, wow, like I'll find people, like I'll be the last monkey there, like everyone will be so smart. And I mean, you think that, no? Because of fucking going to Silicon Valley and what I've learned there is there's very, very smart people there, but also because there's a lot of them. But there's also like, I don't think when I looked, for example, at the talent that 20 was at the company and I compare it to the average talent at Facebook, I don't think it was unequal. And this gives to me, like this gives a very good message to everyone that wants to build a team here. There's definitely a lot of people that are talented and that we can build great stuff. Actually, it's happening. Look, I don't know. There's like a lot of companies here in Barcelona, global. Imagine we have $1 billion companies here. Sincerely, I'm pretty optimistic. Now, of course, when it comes to disruption and building like the next OpenAI, it's clear it's easier to happen in the US just because Europe will be a problem. For example, I was working in crypto before leaving Facebook. There was this project that was called Calibra. And basically, Facebook wanted to build their own crypto. And it was a very big project. It was a secret project from Facebook. And I remember that we received a cease and desist that from Europe, meaning you have to stop building this or, it will be very bad consequences. We didn't receive it from the US, Like, of course, there's like, if you really want to build something disruptive that's a little dangerous, like, yeah, the US will be a better place. But there's a ton of product to build in Europe that I'm sure we have the talent and the occasion to build.
That is, I think, something we both wanted to hear, and also other entrepreneurs listening to this podcast, because we always see how like the US is the place to be, to disrupt and to raise money and to build a great the great like next unicorn and so on. Whereas here in Europe, you can also build great stuff. And we've seen a lot of these lately, a lot of unicorns. As you mentioned, we have Factorial, we have Glovo, we have Secura, like a bunch of startups here in Barcelona that are building great things and also growing a lot in the past 5 years. So I guess Barcelona is not such a bad city to start your project after all. Jordi,
And I'll say, I'm sure that percentually, like there's as many, we just don't do them as many, but we only know about the things that works in the US, but there's a lot more built. So yeah.
That's actually another topic that we experienced, Danny and I, is that the ecosystem in Barcelona of entrepreneurs, it's tiny compared to other places. Well, not tiny, but small compared to other places in terms of, at least the people around us, they don't really incentivize or push that like risk averse entrepreneurial mindset. Whereas if you go to San Francisco or to any other like New York, wherever you go to like a climbing gym or whatever, you're going to be listening to people that are discussing what they are building and working on, and whoever you run into, they are half built or are building something. Whereas here in Barcelona, everyone has their steady job, 9 to 5. They close their laptop at 6, max 7 p.m. And okay, yes, I'm going to go have a beer and I'm going to enjoy the sun in the weekend. So I guess it's in that like social environment, it's not as easy to move forward if you're not that, like, if you don't have the ecosystem to keep pushing, right? I don't know what's your experience. That's something that we have personally felt in the past year and a half.
My experience is, so I think that in the US, there's a lot of people that has 9 to 5 jobs or, similar.
Sure.
The thing is that what entrepreneurs do in the US better than, and we can learn from here, is that they are willing to meet in one place. And because like my experience here in Barcelona is that there's been moments when I've been connected in a room full of entrepreneurs. You feel all this energy. Like there is this energy in Barcelona. Like, but we don't do as good as the job of saying, let's meet together, let's have this contact, let's have, I don't know, like, let's have a poker game that we meet every 2 weeks and we play poker together while we're speaking about how hard it is to have a startup, and we connect and we give advice each other. I think that there's a network, but like we can do a better job on spending time all together, because I think there's a lot of value. And personally, when I've met, like entrepreneurs from here, from Barcelona, like it's energizing and there's so much to learn. There's people that have a ton of experience that are serial entrepreneurs, and then you see them on LinkedIn that are doing great stuff, and wow, like it's impressive. Yeah, like, so we need to work towards this. And like for me, I like poker. So I always say, guys, one day we need to organize this poker game that every 2 weeks we can meet and play poker. And while we play poker, we socialize, but it could be anything. And someone will have to take the lead on this.
Actually,
I actually like playing poker as well, but I don't like it when someone else offers to play poker, because that means that they might be better than you. Then it's not that fun.
Actually, now it would be a great place to promote the AI Asian meetup, like a meetup that Nacho started, and that we meet like every 2 months, I would say, like a team of, we are now 7-8 people, guys building AI Asian companies. Yeah, we are trying to put our we're trying to do our best to also contribute to the ecosystem of entrepreneurs in Barcelona. So
Yeah, I
I'll
think we
come
should do some
definitely.
sort of. I think we should do some Christmas AI Christmas event before the year ends, and we will definitely get you involved.
Sounds
if you
cool.
come, we'll play poker.
Oh, yeah, then I'll
we
do.
can we can we can rent a place where they let us a table or something. I don't have like somewhere over there all the metallic box with all the chips and everything inside. So we can
Perfect.
make it
I'll
up.
bring mine. We'll do some poker.
Awesome. Amazing. Jordi, we're coming to an end. It's been over 45 minutes already. And we have some sort of a closing tradition for the podcast where we ask a few of more personal questions just to get the more like a humanistic side of yourself. Question that we ask everyone, and it's a little more general, which is what is the one book that you would recommend to anyone?
So, because we've been speaking about books and we've been speaking about the cold start problem. It's a book about when you're building a product that has some kind of network. It can be like us that we have a network of people communicating, or, an example like Globo or Weddle, that has networks that are bet. It explains how to start these networks and what are the balances between the decisions you'll take. Super interesting.
It's called again, sorry, the what?
The cold start problem.
Okay, got it.
Um,
Got it. Yeah, understood. Then second question, what do you like to do in your free time?
a bunch of stuff. I like a lot martial arts, as you can see by
Wow.
my face. So yeah, I box, Muay Thai, mixed martial arts, a little bit of everything. And it's a great way. I think it's cool for a startup founder for two reasons. While it's great exercise, you meet with people and it's a way to really disconnect because either you're focused, either you get kicked in the face. So it helps you like forget about everything else. But also to me, it teaches something that all founders need to learn is to stand up again when you fall. And I think that the biggest thing for a startup founder is perseverance. And martial arts teaches a lot of this.
We got actually a co-host here that also does a bit of that, Danny. It's your time to shine. I had my time to shine a few podcasts ago. It's your time to shine now.
I mean, I cannot compete against MMA or Muay Thai. I just do Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. You are
that's
next
great.
level,
I
man.
mean, I'm sure you would get me on the floor.
Yeah, well, if I manage to get you on the floor, maybe I have an advantage. But before getting that, maybe I'm dead. So
Maybe you're knocked out by then.
yeah, first I have to touch you, right? But
Stealing
actually,
a question from Danny. Danny, go
no, I
ahead.
just want to make a point here because that's something that I also love, like to do practice sports. Now I'm into Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu for 3 years. And, I've always wanted to try like MMA or more like a striking sport. But, I really hate, it really concerns me, like being repetitively hit on the head. I don't know, what's your take here? It's not something that concerns you. Like,
No, I mean, here's my advice when it comes to the striking part of sport, whether it's boxing, Muay Thai, kickboxing, this kind of stuff. The first is, as everything, you have to do it in a safe environment. So I like to spar, and the people I spar more strongly with is the people that I know the better. Because I know, I trust them. I know they know when they can hit hard and when they cannot. So that's one thing. And the other thing, I have to say that personally, when I'm focused, and that's another thing you learn, when I'm really focused on my sparring, that is basically the moment that you're actually fighting if you want, I don't feel pain because if your mind, and I think this is the same with startup, if your mind is really into what you are doing, like you forget about like the sensibility that you generally have when you're not focused on this. So, and then the third advice is keep your guard hard. Start getting kicked in the face.
That was fun. And Danny, I had a last question, but it's gonna be it's still from you that we have asked before, which is if there were no screens in the world, what would you do with your life? No screens, no laptops, no iPhones.
Good question. when I was young, I used to be, I was going with orchestras and bands, like mounting the scenes, and I was a light technician. I liked that a lot. But I think that anything related with solving a problem, for example, I think that a lot of product people would have loved to be inventors when inventing a chair was something. So I may have been this or a detective. I love to like try to like the same thing with the bug, that something is happening and get to understand it and find why that is happening. Only one of these two things.
Awesome. That's a pretty solid answer. Danny, your take?
Well, actually, Nacho, you forgot the most important question of the podcast. It's like a tradition that we ask this question to all our guests. So, and it's the fuck, marry, kill game of AI solutions or AI tools. What's your decision here? You have to choose a tool or an AI solution that you would fuck, because it's nice to play for an afternoon, but then not anymore. Then marry, like the tool or solution that you have to live the rest of your life with. And finally, a tool or solution that you would definitely kill because it's a complete pain.
Okay. I guess that the marry would be like cursor, because like actually it's who I have a more stable relationship with right now. And we are working towards marrying. I don't know, at some point Cloud Code or something could break it. But like for now, we have been stable for a year. So it's pretty good for AI. For like, I have a doubt about, so all these tools around doing deep fakes. I have one of these things that I'm kind of, I would both fuck and kill. Like it's cool to play with these, like when you play with these kind of tools for the fun. At the same time, I think that right now they are one of the most dangerous tools that we have. And for example, I'm more worried, but I would say fuck this one and then kill. Like I think there's a tendency towards having these friends, AI friends. And I think that there's very good ways to build this. I'm not saying, I think, but there's a way to build it when it comes to engagement. Yeah. Chris Cox at Facebook would say that when you optimize for engagement, you reinvent addiction. So when you optimize for how much people use something and you do it with data science, what you it is reinvent addiction. I think with AI, there will be an addiction towards tools that are not will to help you, but to make you use them. The next TikTok. And I would kill that before it leaves.
Okay.
Amazing.
I think it's the most
Amazing. I like
original answer to the question we have had so far.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Well, I think we can call it a wrap. Everyone, thank you for tuning. Jordi, thank you so much for spending your precious time with us. So yeah, thank you everyone. See you next time.
See you.
Bye-bye.
Such a pleasure. Thank you for having me.